And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter on this Wednesday, the 18th of February. Your host, Daniel Horowitz, back here today at The Blaze to discuss the crossroads that the GOP and really conservatives are at here. Because what we have seen so far is that you cannot teach an old dog, or shall we say an old rhino, a new trick. I'm not seeing any new policy, any new strategy, any new endeavors, new types of candidates. Just the same old, oh, everything is good. Democrats are bad. The economy is great. We don't know what we believe. We defend the K-shaped economy as if it's ours, as if it's something we believe in. The easy money, debt-driven, Aristopopulism and elites, all the while allowing Democrats to outflank them. And then we just move on to the next one in line in the country club chosen system. By the way, just to be clear, the media has successfully chosen the GOP presidential nominee every single time, just so you know. There are no exceptions if you go back and think about it. And now we just move on to the next guy in line. But imagine if we had a party that was built upon land, community, neighborhood, quality of life, liberty, that actually showed it cared about the people, not in a socialist fake way that we're just going to give people handouts, but to actually recreate free markets, remove the government policies that create monopolies over healthcare, over food, over farming, over land use, rather than a party that honestly is nothing but big tech biatches and Epstein elites. And that's what they've become. And they're allowing Democrats to outflank them. So I'm going to show the contrast of what the GOP currently is and what it can and ought to be. And if it doesn't move in that direction, it will die. They are getting crushed on the land use issue, on the data center issue, the big tech elites, while basically telling everyone to go eat cake and how the economy is simply awesome. And we're going to have coming up Jim Carlin, one of my favorite candidates on from Iowa, who is actually running as someone who is running on not populism and certainly not Aristopopulism, but true free and fair markets that appeal to the people, that explain why the anti-market policies make the economy terrible for them, the easy money policies, rather than lying and telling them the economy is great for them. And by the way, it's not just a matter that the Republicans suck, and by nominating and electing the status quo Republicans, even if they win the general election, you lose the minute they win the primary because they're basically like Democrats. But it's also in the general election, the current crop of Republicans, they will absolutely lose to the Democrats because they have no narrative. They own all the current baggage, the corruption, the status quo, bad economy. They defend it. They gaslight the people that the economy is great, and they have no plan to fix it, conservative or otherwise, frankly. So it's not just a matter of needing better people in primaries. We need them to win general elections too. And Iowa certainly is a good test run of this theory. So we'll have Jim coming up momentarily. As always, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Horowitz Show. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, and please subscribe to our Substack, Liberating Truths on Substack. So I want to start with a quote from J.D. Vance, because he is the one that is being bandied about as the next greatest thing, that all we need to do is move on to the next guy in line. By the way, we've never, let's be clear, he never earned it. He never fought for us. He never bled for the cause. He was taking 50 million positions on different issues, then was in the Senate for 3 minutes, and then was plucked out of the Senate to be Trump's running mate of no accomplishment of his own. It was because of Tucker and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel. And we're supposed to abolish the primary and just believe that there's nothing more than this guy. Okay, well, if we're going to move on from Trump, in what direction should we move? The direction we should move is away from Aristopopulism, away from kowtowing to the big tech elites and then being like, oh, whoops, it's really bad for people while I'm telling them it's good. So then here's a bunch of socialism and a bunch more easy money and handouts, and that's going to obviously be even more inflationary. No, we need to do the exact opposite. Stop giving special favors to the elites, but then we don't need to give people handouts. They just need a fair shot. So no elitism and populism mixed together. That is at its core. To the extent that you could ascribe some intellectual moorings to President Trump, it's Aristopopulism, the mixture of elitism and populism, the worst of both elements, rather than conservative free markets with a populist message that is rooted in truth. To the extent you want to go that route, so JD is quintessentially that. Take a listen to what he had to say about the solution to affordable housing.
Articulated a number of ways to make housing more affordable, especially for young Americans who want to start a family, want to raise that family in a house that they own. I think that's a critical part of the American dream. One of the president's proposals he came out with just a couple of weeks ago, actually, was to stop institutional institutional investors from buying homes that should go to American families and to American citizens. That's going to make housing more affordable. But the president has also driven home the most important thing that we can do to make housing more affordable is to actually lower interest rates. Right now, because of the Federal Reserve, we have interest rates that are still way too high, even though inflation has come down. Frankly, it's come down faster than people thought it would under the Trump administration, and yet the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates stubbornly high.
Folks, I cannot think of a worse statement, a worse mixture of anti-conservative policy, anti-truth policy, and also terrible messaging for the election. So the economy is so good, inflation is down so much, and then the problem with housing is that rates are too high. Well, we dropped rates 100 basis points, and yet it hasn't solved the problem. The goal, the most important thing is to bring down prices, not interest rates. So interest rates are actually, especially with the 100 basis point decrease, they're actually lower than the historical average now. Put it at zero. Well, the reality is no. The reason they're not at zero is because it can't be at zero because there is inflation and people need to get a rate of return on keeping their money with the treasuries, especially when we have that much in debt to offload on the market and are that desperate to sell them. It's like the exact opposite. That is what caused prices to rise. The problem is that we offered near zero interest rates for that long that created this trap. These are the very policies that harm the forgotten American. They sound real nice. These near zero interest rates, the easy money, everything is unproductive debt. That's what created the Mag 7 big tech monopoly. And yet he wants to double and triple down on that even more than the RINOs and the Democrats ever wanted to do. That's the single most important thing, is to have zero interest rates. When it's like saying, you set a community ablaze, and then you're like, the single biggest solution, the single most important solution to dousing the flames is to take a blowtorch. It is incredibly dumb. I don't even understand. So this is what we're going to lose an election on? Telling people that there's no inflation? Defending an economy where nothing about it is conservative? Look, at least tell people Biden saddled us with this. We need more time. We need more votes. We want to do this and this, but we don't have the votes. But this is ridiculous. And again, we're at the peak of our gross debt is the highest it's ever been. The public debt, share of the debt, is about the peak of World War II, but we were building things. This is all unproductive debt, building more debt, more dependency, more fake AI buildings that have yet to produce revenue. And don't tell me there's no inflation. Like, the amount of Americans working two jobs is up, by my count, a whopping 17-18% since Trump came on the scene, first took office in 2017. When he took office, it was roughly the levels it was, most of modern history. And now it's up in an insane amount. It's well beyond a record. And it's not because there's such great productivity. People cannot afford things. The worst thing you can do is lie. And again, at a time of an affordability crisis, the message needs to be that we need to start reallocating investments towards things that a free market would demand, not a fake market, a fake economy, an ultra processed artificial economy. The data center issue is the new Tea Party. So you have this odd coalition going on throughout the country of Trump voters, Freedom Caucus members of the legislature, and Democrats for their own purposes. They're not serious because when they get into power, then they join with it. We see that in Virginia, actually. But they're all getting together to fight data centers while the mainstream of the GOP and Trump and Vance continue to push this data center fascism. I want to move on to Oklahoma. I'm going to show you, and those of you who listen, you could hear some of the shouting on the audio, a town hall in Claremore, Oklahoma, where residents turned out in full force to protest data centers, and a guy was arrested for speaking out. Let's watch here.
What? Oh! Channel 8, note how they let the person positive go over his time. You're shameful. You're shameful. Shameful.
Okay, we just
Everybody
need
take a
everybody
picture of
to get
this.
down.
Disgusting!
We need to get through the meeting so that everyone can
Yeah,
talk.
why don't y'all quit arresting people?
Just arrest them for talking.
Would you make a note that they let their guy speaking for go over without arresting him?
Now, folks, take a look around the room. If you're listening, watch the video. These are not Minneapolis Antifa protesters. You look around the room, they're quintessentially our people. They look it, they're kind of old conservatives, all white in the room. It's just, I mean, Rogers County is a county that Trump carried by 50 points. And these people, you could see the shock on their face. It's not like, don't tase me, bro. These, these videos where they're like, running at ICE and then they're like, oh, why are you arresting him? No, literally, the guy clearly wasn't doing anything. And I happen to know members of the legislature there, and they know who the guy was that was arrested. It wasn't some anarchist or whatever. It was a guy like you and me. This is happening in a Trump plus 50 county. The people are speaking out. Never before has there been such a gulf between the average Republican voter and Trump and the GOP officials, except for a couple of conservatives, Freedom Caucus guys, than we see today as it relates to data centers. That is the reality. Convert or die on this issue. I'm telling you, the Democrats are running up the score. So anyway, one of the best conservatives there, Jim Shaw, we had him on the show last year, I think. He had Oklahoma HB 3724. And it was a common sense bill that basically codified all of their talking points. All of their talking points is that shut up, data centers aren't a problem, they're not going to do this, they're not going to do that. All right, so he's like, let's put that in law. So he passed the following. He proposed the following to the House Utilities Committee in Oklahoma, where basically it required a water use assessment before, so we know how much it's going to use. It banned state or local governments from offering tax credits, rebates, refunds, abatements, grants, forgivable loans, or other tax, financing and exemptions like that for the facilities. Because again, these are the wealthiest companies in the world, and if they're that much of a juggernaut, and this is the technology that you can't stop it, it's amazing. All right, then all the more so, we didn't need tax credits to produce iPhones, right? So go ahead and do it. It also made them compliant with noise ordinances. It has to be within the ordinances, right? I can't, perpetually run a leaf blower at night in my neighborhood. That's part of individual liberty. And here's a big one, and I think this is something we need to be pushing. Well, a couple more things we need to be pushing in every community. Take notes. HB 3724, Jim Shaw, Oklahoma. It allows citizens petitions to override county commission decisions, right? So, I know we've talked about, citizens' initiatives are sometimes problems, but this is more of a referendum, a negative on something they're doing. It requires a decommissioning plan. This is a big point of contention that the locals are dealing with. But when I speak to Republican elected officials, they're brain dead and they don't even know the issue. That everyone knows, and the companies know this. The technology is rapidly changing. The notion that you're going to build something this insane that's going to depreciate so quickly when you're not going to get the revenue and the technology is going to change anyway, everyone knows that a good number of them are going to wind up being vacant. And what are you going to do with it? So this requires a decommissioning plan. And finally, it just puts a ban on foreign owned, which we should all agree we shouldn't have, foreign owned data centers for a number of reasons. The land use, land ownership, but also, just the surveillance and all that sort of stuff. So it was voted down. This model bill 3724 was voted down 6-2 in the House Utilities Committee. Do you know who voted for it? Because Jim Shaw is not on the committee. The 2 Democrats, all 6 Republicans voted against it. This is pathetic. We're losing on things we don't even believe in. We're going to lose an election. Could you imagine? I want you, and we're going to bring on a candidate live that talks like this, but I want you to bring on, I want to bring on Jim Shaw himself here, not in person, but a video clip of him presenting his bill before that committee yesterday. And I want you to think as you're listening to him, imagine if we had a president, a GOP speaker, Senate Majority Leader, who actually talked the same way as Jim Shaw. What would our electoral prospects be then? And even in the worst case scenario, you can't win in Pennsylvania, but you wouldn't be losing this deep into red territory. Take a listen to Jim Shaw.
I would like to appeal to you all today. I believe the research is clear and the voice of Oklahomans is clear. They do not want massive industrial complexes in their backyard, or they certainly do not want them so easily shoved through a process completely lacking in oversight and an overall commitment to public health and safety and our constituents' constitutional right to their pursuit of happiness. That's why the local control component of this bill is so important. The American dream is dying in large part because we treat the people of this state like they're a piggy bank here to support government action or the growth of big businesses, rather than recognizing that it's the other way around. Our infrastructure, our government, and the benefits that we provide to companies exist to nourish and support the growth and flourishing of strong, financially stable families in this state. We have an obligation to put their individual rights to keep what they earn first, and then to look at how business partnerships may be able to benefit the people of this state.
Folks, that right there is the central point of contention between real conservatives like Jim Shaw, these Freedom Caucus guys, the candidates that I support, and the status quo GOP, not just from a principled standpoint, but also in terms of electoral viability. You have this point, whether individual rights, land ownership, neighborhood quality of life, sovereignty, does that come first? Or these business partnerships, targeted crony deals, does that come first? And mind you, by the way, these things aren't creating jobs anyway. That is the central point of contention. And you listen to Jim Shaw and people like me, the Democrats are exploiting that. Now, of course, they're a bunch of frauds. Remember Spanberger's promise in Virginia to deal with the data centers? They're not. And we know that. But it's still criminal for Republicans to give them that opening. It's pathetic. Again, I'm telling you a reality. You could agree or disagree with me on data centers. You're gonna die on that issue. Now, before we get to our guest, I just want to just now that we're on AI a little bit, I want to give over a couple minute sort of overview as to where I see the state of play with the data center, the AI issue. Elon Musk tweeted out this morning, upload your medical data to get a second opinion from Grok. And everyone was like, of all political stripes, was like yelling at him. Are you kidding me? Never do that. But the point is, what they're trying to do is gaslight you into taking something that is a tool and it has some use and exaggerate it, that it's the end all. It's not a tool. It replaces every human judgment. aside from ignoring the harms and the surveillance and the data privacy too, which is obviously inherent in that point. Like, folks, as you all know, like I'm actually into cool innovation. For example, do I hate Zoom? We all made fun of the Zoomer generation with COVID. The reason is not because we hate Zoom or we ourselves don't even use it. We use it all the time. But we understand what it is and isn't. It's a tool. It's not designed to replace human interactions as the COVID regime was trying to acculturate society to do, because we know God created us with a sort of chemical reaction with live human to human interaction that you will not get even on a crystal clear video conference. But it's not a bad thing, but you don't exaggerate what it is. The concern I have now is that they're gaslighting an unsustainable model into being sustainable enough on a temporary basis to get the camel's nose under the tent and then make it too big to fail. Because again, the depreciation, the tax credits, the zoning favors is everything. Because without that, it is in a free market. Their business model, I am telling you, is completely unsustainable. Why else do you think? Here's the other. There's two other observations I have on that. Number one, they're paying, and Elon's kind of doing this. Why do they need to advertise AI? If it is such a juggernaut, people will use it. They didn't have to beg people to use an iPhone. It was very intuitive. It has its harms, but it is what it is. Whereas this, they're paying people $600,000, influencers, to beg people to use it. Well, why? Why would you need to do that? Okay. And another thing that they're doing is that they're planting articles in corporate media like Semaphore, Axios, that policy makers particularly, get in their inboxes every morning. And an interesting thing that they're doing is they're doing AI doomerism. So some of the people that are kind of on my side of the issue, but they're different because they're saying, oh my gosh, AI is going to take over everything. And I'm like, no, I oppose it for different reasons. I actually don't think it will. They're exaggerating. So now, ironically, I forget the guy's name in Ben in War Room. The guy, he interviewed me and we agree largely, but we disagreed on this point. Ironically, big tech is now putting out these fake articles. Anthropic CEO was jobs are going to disappear. It's actually not true. They're gaslighting, but it's all part of exaggerating its capabilities and trying to acculturate people to remove their humanity rather than use it as a tool of humans, which it can be used. It has its use. That's what they're doing. They're forcing consumers. So the other big thing is they're forcing consumers to lease compute and storage space. I'm telling you, this is what they're doing. You'll own nothing but access to a data center instead of a PC. So by misallocating resources, which again, they can only do with special governmental favors, what happens? All of that funding is steered into data centers. Now, I first warned you about this last year. Now it's everywhere. Cars, phones, and PCs are a fortune. There's a memory shortage. So that in itself is a problem. But it's self-fulfilling reality. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. Because you know what they're going to do. Oh, well, you need data centers. Right now, do you need ChatGPT in your life? Do you need data centers in your life? Everyone knows no. And that's why they need to gaslight. That's why they need to advertise. That's why they need the special governmental favors. But like everything else, it will become a self-fulfilling reality. Well, if they put it all for data centers, then you can't get computers. And then you're going to have to rent space at a data center, and then you'll need a data center. That is what they're trying to do. That is the game plan. Amazon's U.S. data for January 2026 shows desktop CPU sales dropped by 21,000 units. That's down a decline of 59% over 1 year. That's a big problem. That's not advancing forwards. That's backwards. But again, like what I'm trying to tell you is I am not worried about it actually replacing us. I'm worried about them creating a fake reality that's too big to fail. Let's go through some of the promises that were made. Do you know that kind of like global warming, how they said by now Antarctica would be melted and the coast of Florida would be underwater? None of that ever happened. And now in the East, we had a record cold winter, although in the West, it was very warm. Many other years, it was the opposite. It's called the jet stream. It happens. But anyway, McKinsey predicted that 75 million people would need to switch jobs because of AI. Never happened. That was, by the way, predicted by 2025. BCG predicted 1/4 of jobs will be taken by 2025. Never happened. Gartner predicted 1/3 of jobs would be taken. Gartner also predicted 85% of customer interactions would be with AI. As you well know, if you try with your credit card, those chatbots suck. Man, are they bad. And that's why it hasn't done it. Because you can't replace a human. Again, it has its role, not what they're telling us. And I'll tell you what it's doing. Meta has now secured a patent for an AI system designed to simulate deceased users by analyzing their past data, enabling the account to keep posting, like on Facebook. Like that's progress. That's what we need. That's what we need data centers for. That's what we need to destroy our farmland, our community quality of life, our rural America, our power, our water, for a bunch of enshittification of the internet and chatbot slop. No, and a free market would not vet that out. And mind you, it's not just a matter of, land favors and tax credits. It's what we started the show with. An entire generation of near zero interest rates, unnaturally, by the Federal Reserve. It's funny, JD was criticizing the Federal Reserve for not being low enough. But the reality is, that is what steered capital unnaturally towards the incumbent monopolies and cemented impervious monopolies in multiple fields in a way that we now don't have choice in competition. And we talked about this yesterday with the food cartel, the land monopolies, corporate farming, which I want to get to in our next segment. So we have a choice in front of us. We could continue to lose, to paraphrase George Patton, for the other SOB's ideology. Like, if we're going to lose an election, could it at least be on things we believe in, not what's antithetical to us, and have Democrats outflank us on things that we shouldn't even be pushing, whether we win or lose an election? Or will we actually look towards a new generation of candidates that aren't aristocratic and elitist, but they're not socialist populists? They actually are traditional conservative, which is the best for the average man. And no one embodies this like our next guest that I want to get to right now. But again, just remember, like and subscribe our YouTube page at Horowitz Show. I know a lot of you still listen in the car, so that's fine. But do know we have a YouTube page that's being censored. So make sure you like and subscribe automatically. So, folks, every one of my colleagues will agree with the assertion that the GOP party stinks and it needs wholesale reform. We're sick of the RINOs. We're sick of the chambercrats. They don't represent the people. They just represent the special interests. My whole life I've been hearing it, and we're going to continue to hear it. But I'm pretty much the only one that will actually say, okay, well, there's something called primaries. And we always talk about them in the abstract. And we're always like, why don't we get normal candidates? Why can't we get people to stand up for us? But sometimes, like it says at the end of Deuteronomy, that the word of God is right in front of you. It's not overseas that you have to cross over to get it. It's not in the heaven that you have to climb up. It is right there in your mouth and your heart to do. Now, there are some races we don't have good candidates, but there are people who step up. And do you know what happens? No one follows them. No one supports them. No one takes notice of them. My next guest embodies this. So Jim Carlin is a former member of the Iowa House and Senate, jousted with the GOP leadership to get conservative initiatives passed throughout his entire career. Now, he could have stayed there as a safe conservative seat from Northwest Iowa, but he took on the David versus Goliath. He ran against Chuck Grassley, the longest serving Republican, beloved Republican, because, look, he's a nice person at an individual level. But again, I mean, he's obviously not going to fight for the economic message that we've been talking about today against the special interests. And he didn't have to do that. And he did. And I had him on and I promoted him, but no one took notice. But undeterred, he came back again and then ran for the other seat, announced he would run this election cycle for the other seat, Joni Ernst. Everyone complained, oh, Joni Ernst, terrible, terrible, terrible. But no one lifted a finger to do anything. Well, guess what? Do you know why Joni Ernst retired? You know why she retired? In big part because Jim announced his intention to challenge her. Okay? So now you have one of the most liberal members of the House in Iowa, the U.S. House, Ashley Hinson, who's like, oh, I want it. I want it. Now, mind you, she never had the guts to run when it actually mattered, when the incumbent was in the race. And that should tell you everything you need to know. Oh, now that it's an open seat, next one in line in the country club. And, as always, the establishment figures in the party and the moneyed interest gravitate to her. No, I'm sorry. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Do we actually believe in our own talking points? And folks, it's not just a matter of the fact that Jim versus Ashley is greater ideologically in terms of the gulf than the gulf between an R and a D. But you run the risk of actually losing in the general election. So especially in the governor's race, the Democrats are making a big play for that seat. The control of the Senate, okay, runs through Iowa. If the Democrats run the table, which they are ahead in Alaska now, they're starting to pick off red states. They're looking at Ohio. Iowa is the 51st seat for them. If you continue to nominate a status quo Republican who thinks the economy is amazing and has all the big tech corporate special interest baggage for Democrats to hit them on, you're going to lose the seat anyway. It's not even a matter of having another liberal Republican in. You won't have any Republican in. This is what we need to understand. To the extent you're going to staunch the bleeding in the general election in states like Iowa that used to be kind of Democrat swing, turned very red, but now Democrats are making inroads again, it's going to have to be by electing people like Jim Carlin. That is really the only way forward. You could check him out at carlinforussenate.com, and he is with us in the flesh. Hey, Jim, it's been way too long. Welcome back to the Blaze.
Oh, always good to be with you, Daniel. Thanks for having me on today.
All right. So you heard me filibuster there.
Yeah.
I want to get to you. You've really just run headfirst into the brick wall of the uniparty monopoly. Why is it that you're doing it again? And what do you expect to accomplish in a Senate full of liberal Republicans?
Well, I think awareness is rising. You talked about this. You talk about this all the time. And, I think we like to believe that we're electing candidates, but the truth is a lot of these candidates in the uniparty, they're picked. They're picked because the establishment base knows that they can be controlled. And the rungs of the ladder basically are defined by a willing compliance to serve those interests. So you think you're electing candidates. The reality is you're electing their donors. And that's why you have some campaigns that are flush with millions and millions of dollars. Those dollars are actually the strings of an investment. You could call it protection money if you want to, but they're there to represent the financial interests of the corporations that own those politicians in that base. And, having served in the House and Senate, I saw it in the State House. What was driving the adults of the agenda? Well, that was the main defining attribute that I saw. And I see it now in America. And, I think the right and left narrative is legit, but I think our eyes really need to be on the ball of a couple different things. Economic standard of living. Let's look at that ball. What's going on? Is there a wealth transfer that's been going on for a while? because I really think we need to start being smart enough to look at these big market crashes and see who wins on the other side of these market crashes. Who wins when the housing bubble's created, and who gets the bill for the inflation? Who saw their premiums double on their health insurance, and now their physicians are getting a hard time taking, getting a diagnostic workup for patients. On the student loan side, what is happening to they're becoming indentured servants to a $1.7 trillion industry run by the private sector. So, the money usually, as a lawyer, I know the money usually leads to the truth, and we have to have intentional, self-aware consciousness brought to that one thing, Daniel.
The wealth transfer, I love it, because here's the problem. When we were growing up listening to Rush Limbaugh in the 90s, Democrats talked about that more. But what has happened since then with the GFC and the zero interest rates, and you can't compare our economy and our society from the 90s to today. And then obviously with COVID, that was the Great Reset. This is not our economy. We don't believe in any of it. None of it is free market. So obviously the Democrats helped create it. They were the ones who created it and the government interventions, and they supported it all. But the point is, at the end of the day, it flips back and forth. They are not incumbent now. Republicans are. And if Republicans are going to own the status quo, they are campaigning on what you just said. Now, they caused it, and they're not going to do the right solution. But if you don't have candidates that are untarnished by the baggage and have a message of how moving away from the free market created the wealth transfer, I fear we're going to lose the general election to people like Rob Sands, who's running for governor of the Democrat in your state.
No, I think that fear is well-founded. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. I have some friends running for governor, Brad Sherman and Eddie Andrews, who are, by the way, either one of those guys are very good candidates. When I served in the Senate, Rob Sand was kind of an interesting character because I didn't see him do a whole lot. I was part of a group of people that wanted some auditing of our local school board, Sioux City, and he really wasn't interested in doing that job, which is his job. But the other thing about him is the big money interests that he says that he's immune from. I don't think that's the case at all. I think he would just be another one of those people who wears the garments of, a bleeding heart, but he has the soul of just another billionaire boys club persona that is just,
for sure.
They're smart about their messaging, right? They play that game, Daniel.
Jim, but if we would run someone like Ashley Hinson, your opponent in the general election for Senate, isn't that going to make us more vulnerable to his messaging? We know he's not sincere, but I'm going to tell you, for example, he is running. I saw a video of him at a town hall blasting the data centers, the land grab of Iowans. Now, we know that when Democrats get in, they're always taken over by big tech too. But the point is, we shouldn't allow them to outflank us on that.
Absolutely not. And, messaging is one thing. We know that. Messaging is one thing, and following through is quite another. The data centers, and I think we have 104 of those things here. And, I think we need to be a little bit more, what is this doing on our water supply and our energy supply? Is the energy that these things require, what is that doing on the demand side of our utility bill at the end of the month? I mean, what are we doing?
12% of all energy use in Iowa as of a few years ago was data centers. And this is, if they build all the ones they want to build, I don't even know how much that is. Virginia is about 27%. So that's where you're headed.
Yeah.
You're headed where Virginia is.
Well, that's not good. And then, when you consider all the tax subsidies these things get that, we pay for, we put them in the ground, we allocate the land for them. And, they're competing with our farmers for water. Iowa, we've got a drought. And so, on the water side, you're talking, I think at Council Bluffs alone, Daniel, was 1 billion gallons of water in 2024, excuse me.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. And I want to zoom out to a broader discussion. if I have a senatorial candidate from Iowa on, I got to broach this because
Absolutely.
to me, land is the one thing we have. So we don't have anything. The globalist elites have taken everything from us. They manipulate every industry, everything. The one thing that at least the conservative constituents have is red state land. We have most of the land for farming, for homesteading. That is the heart of America. And for whatever reason, God, we always believe, contrary to the peak oil people, he replenishes the world, but land is the one thing he doesn't create more of. So as conservatives, that's part of what we want to conserve, that legacy. What we have seen in places like Iowa is an all-out assault on using it for everything but what it should be used for. Wind, solar, data centers, and carbon capture pipelines. If you go to the Senate, they want to go federally now. They have legislation in the House to go and block states from having any sort of zoning, natural zoning, to deal with data centers or carbon capture pipelines. What would you do?
I wouldn't lean that way. I don't think that's constitutional. I don't see that in the Constitution. I think states have the right to define those sectors. You know, my opponent, Ashley Hinson, actually, the one piece of legislation she actually worked on, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's called the EATS Act. And basically, in substance, what it did was it put all regulatory authority in the hands of the federal government to the detriment of the state and regulatory aspect or local regulatory of ag. That's not, I said that wrong. It basically put all the regulatory authority in the federal government and it took it away from states and local communities, which is a huge power grab. And I don't have to tell you, these regulatory bodies are overseen by former executives and the very companies that they're supposed to regulate. So it doesn't serve Iowans, and it certainly doesn't serve farmers when they've got 380 corn and they had a good year a few years ago. And right now, you would think the input side of their costs would go down. Not a bit. They're losing money. And I think you're probably going to go this way into the centralization of our input markets, in our grain markets, in our meat, our meat packers. They're all becoming increasingly centralized, and farmers right now are basically kind of like contract labor, honestly. And so right now in this country, 45,000 family farms are gone each year, Daniel. And where do they end up? They end up being bought up by corporate farms.
Yep.
And we're witnessing the vanishing of the family farm, because our farmers in Iowa are losing over $100 an acre to get their corn in the ground right now.
And again, when you artificially steer the market with the Federal Reserve and all that towards the big tech companies, and they have the capital to buy up all the land for data centers and unnaturally rezone ag land to that only creates greater land appreciation for them and harms them. And obviously the property taxes, which, by the way, they want to make it that the data centers don't have to pay, but the farmers have to pay sales tax on their equipment, somehow. So there's that asymmetry there. But I really want to broach your idea for agriculture, because this really makes me mad. I have watched Congress very closely for 20 years. And what I've noticed consistently is for 2 generations, Republicans have monopolized the Senate representation of farm states, almost exclusively Republican, Iowa being a great example, at least since Tom Harkin retired. Republicans have owned it. And all they do is talk about, agricultural needs, at least give lip service. Oh, everything is about the farmer. So they've been very well represented. This was Madison's design, because you get the same, amount of senators as my state, Maryland, which is not really such a farming state. So we should have been running up the score here. And we all had to hear that, the farming industry needs cheap labor. So, for example, for years, this is why we couldn't deal with illegal immigration. You know why Republicans supported it for years until recently, and they kind of still support it. Because all the farmers need the cheap labor. Everything the farmers. So, Jim, Why is it that after all that mollycoddling of farms and the farm bills that spent $1 trillion per 5-year Stalin farm bill plan, is it that the independent farmer is disappearing after all that? And what would you do different?
So, you alluded to the Federal Reserve. So listen, land is an investment. And we saw that in the housing sector during COVID. Probably trillions of dollars made its way into residential real estate. It's made its way, I believe, into farm ground. The cost, you can actually spend $20,000 an acre right now in some parts of Iowa. So when it's that expensive and you're not making a profit, what happens to the family farm? It dies. So right now around the state, there's these guys that they rent property to farm. They rent farm ground. They're going to disappear because they're not going to be able to make any money on renting that ground. And you're going to see like a big part of agriculture, the farmers that have retired, that rented their farm ground, they're not going to have that rental income coming in. And so that's going to open up a bigger door to more farm ground being bought up by these corporate interests. And we need to be smarter about who exactly is buying our land. We've talked about keeping China and foreign ownership out of our land, but we really need to see when these land auctions take place, we need to have some type of audit follow-up on who exactly is buying this land. Because I think, we saw this in residential real estate when the price has gone up 45%, right? Who made the money? The private equity, the hedge fund people, they made some money, right? All right, well, who paid with the inflation on the trillions that were printed? We did. So the people that don't own the stock market, aren't heavily vested in real estate, what happens to them? They get the snot slapped out of them with that K-shaped economy you were talking about the other day.
So why do you think Ashley Hinson is not suitable to advance this message and would be vulnerable to, again, Democrats are gunning for that seat, which is surprising, given that Trump won the state by 13 points.
Look at her votes. So, I mean, are you still doing that conservative review thing with?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's old. We haven't done it for this Congress. We didn't have the, people to update it, but inform people of what is going on here, because again, this is the typical next in line. She's a congresswoman. Let's move on to the Senate.
Right. Well, if you're a social conservative, which I am, I mean, my faith is my life. She voted against marriage, traditional marriage. She actually took the position that parents whose kids have been indoctrinated into the trans lifestyle shouldn't be able to get their kids into counseling. It's called conversion therapy. All right. So on the social side, she bears no semblance whatsoever to 95% of the Republican base on those things. Right. But then, you throw into the mix her donors and her votes. In Iowa, you and I have talked about this, the CO2 pipeline, the private sector eminent domain taking of Iowa farm ground where there's billions in tax credits involved. Who was one of her biggest donors was Bruce Rastetter, that guy from Summit Carbon Solutions.
Oh, no.
So what's she going to do? We already know. You already know where she's going to side on that issue. And, unfortunately for Iowa farmers that believe in private property rights, our Republican base on the House side went to bat for the 45Q portion of those tax credits, which basically, without the tax credits, you don't see the pipeline. So, if private property rights are a big thing for you, Ashley Hinson is not somebody you want to get on board with. If you think that the deep state is a real thing, geez, I do. Ashley Hinson voted for continue the funding of USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, which, basically
they were part of the censorship regime.
They were. That's where that money goes. It's like, because they're NGOs, there's no accountability. So what does it do? It gives the bad guys in our government plausible deniability, right? That's what it does.
Wait a minute. So you're telling, so this is important for people to know. The House is more conservative than the Senate. We all know what happens to them when they get in the Senate. So if this is what she's doing in the House, once she gets a 6-year term in the Senate, it's the typical GOP leadership there, which has been terrible for decades. I mean, heck, even since the contract with America time, that's where everything went to die. We don't have enough votes there. We only have a handful of semi-decent senators there. But my question to you is, okay, so, you made the case why, obviously, it's not just that she's not a conservative, but she actually has all the wrong associations that will make her vulnerable to the Democrat takeover, because they could talk about that wealth transfer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Democrats are talking about the land grab. They are getting to the right of establishment Republicans on the carbon capture and data center issues.
They are, and that is a vulnerability. I am actually on the right side of those issues. I have friends in the Senate. You know my friend Kevin Alonso.
Transactional gold, man.
Yeah, he's a transactional gold, which, by the way, I am. I believe in that.
It's in committee this week, and it's been voted down 2 years in a row by the same sorts of special interests: gold, land, liberty, God. That needs to be our platform.
It's not a bad platform.
Again, when we talk about wealth transfer, could you imagine if everything would have been transactional gold the last number of years, where people's wealth would have been, the sustainability of their paycheck, of their savings, and then this entire monetary manipulation that allows the incumbent monopolies to be monopolies, it's gone. So land use and currency, is everything. You're running on that. I'm just trying to speed it up because we're almost out of time here.
Sure.
I want to ask you this. What you've been in the years ago, I guess in the 80s, you were in the military, and then you were in the legislature. What is it you're most proud about in your career that you've done that will give people confidence that when you get to the Senate, you won't just be kind of an okay conservative vote, but one of the guys that is giving voice to all these issues, even when the GOP leadership at all levels go sour on us?
Well, there's a few things that I got to be part of that I'm very proud of. Me and Senator Zahn, Chapman, and Bertrand, we actually forced passage of the heartbeat bill, the nation's first heartbeat bill that eventually made it to the Supreme Court through Texas. We did that by telling leadership, they told us, you don't get a heartbeat bill. So our response was, you don't get a budget.
Yep.
They thought we were kidding. 2 days later, 2:20 in the morning, we're debating it. So we learned the value of leverage in that. And just getting to be part of that, I know that bill has actually resulted in saving lives around the country. But they made me and that's the value that cannot be overstated, in my opinion. They made me the Senate Veterans Affairs Chair, Daniel. I don't know if you know that, but when they did, I got asked to visit the Iowa Veterans Home. And when I did, the lawyer in me was like, why did 90 guys want to see me? And 10 minutes into the conversation, I find out that 4 of their friends were put in the Alzheimer's ward for complaining about having their cigarettes taken away from them. Now, the reality is that was their family time. They complained about it. They put them in the Alzheimer's ward. I looked at that commandant who was not supposed to be listening in, and I said, you know where we're going? We're going to go visit those 4 men right now. And I made that son of a gun take us to those 4 men. The first 3 were fine. The 4th guy, he'd been drugged by the time we got to him. And that really happened. That commandant got fired for stealing $100,000. The first investigation yielded nothing. And they said, there's nothing here. We didn't give up. Senator Edler worked with me on this. We didn't give up. We went to the Department of Inspections and Appeals and we said, you need to look at this. They came back. They said, you're right. There's elder abuse here, which, it's how you look after people that don't have some big economic stake in this game and how you protect them and defend them. That's really the big piece of this. How the individual is treated and defined and respected is how the game is supposed to be framed. That was the dream in the hearts of our founders. When they gave me that chair, I found out the Veterans Trust Fund was supposed to give the interest from it to our veterans in need. And Daniel, you know what I found out? Out of the $30 million, less than 1% of the interest, 1% interest was going to veterans in need. And I went to the treasurer and I said, less than 1%. I thought it was about the veterans. I said, you manage the state pension system. Why can't you give our boys the same deal? You know what, Daniel? They now get the same deal. They make 10 times the revenue. So you have to be willing. You got to be willing to push people. And I'm willing to push people to get good things done. The gender identity bill, the bathroom bill, I authored those before they became law. I did a lot of work on education savings accounts, and I also did a lot of work on a senior property tax freeze that became a law. So like the seniors getting absolutely annihilated by the property taxes, and what's happened in real estate. It's really, really made life hard on them. And you throw into the inflation into that as well. But those are just some of the things I worked. I did a lot of work on sex trafficking. I did a lot of work on medical freedom, fighting vaccination mandates.
Right. That's why I think we met originally was with COVID. Yeah. The medical, you were part of medical freedom before it was cool as a talking point on Twitter. Now every candidate indulges it.
Sure.
That's the thing. We have a choice, folks. It's right in front of you. It's right in front of you. It's not abstract. You say you want it. Then we have candidates that deliver everything you want, and we fall asleep. You're not going to change the party if you don't change the party. And certainly if you keep refilling it with literally the exact same special interest people, except this time around, it's a little different because this time around, they're actually going to lose to Democrats that are able to demagogue and exploit their ridiculous vulnerabilities. You won't have Carlin for US Senate.com. God bless you, Jim. Thanks for running and what you're doing, and definitely keep us updated.
Thanks, Dan.
Take care. So, folks, again, that was Jim Carlin, former state senator, now running for U.S. Senate. He challenged Grassley. I mean, this is what we lack, and this is what I'm trying to find. Now, nobody's perfect. Okay, if you're waiting for a white knight or this, you're not going to have that. But broadly, people like Chris McDaniel, people like Jim Carlin, Chris is not running now, but he did before, that are smart. They're not dumb. They're not just like picking off a Twitter, so either we have the typical Ashley Hinsons or just straight up industry people, or you'll have these guys that read Twitter like the Vivek thing, but then it's all fake. And then they wind up turning the other way. People that have conservatism in their core, social, fiscal, but they get the issues of the time. They know, like the sons of Issachar who know the signs of the times, know what ought to be done, have proof of concept of them fighting the uniparty and GOP leadership. And my gosh, he took it on in the House. He took it on the state Senate. He ran against Grassley, which is like the greatest incumbent ever, and then ran against the other one, chases her out. Now, I didn't say it when he was on, but the other half of the story is Trump comes in and endorses Ashley Hinson. I mean, like, what do you want from me? I am doing what we all say we want, but I'm actually putting pen to paper. Not just I'm against the abstract RINO, but then I support the people who support the specific RINOs that actually get elected. You're not going to change anything. But here's the good news. The GOP will die on its own. When you look at those videos in Trump plus 50 counties, and the people are like, why are you arresting a guy speaking out against data centers? That data center issue, but it's not just about data centers. It's emblematic of land use. It's emblematic of what a free and fair market is versus a crony manipulated fake economy. Pick a side, Trump, pick a side, GOP, because the voters, they certainly will pick a side. Folks, we're out of time today. Let me know your comments, questions, concerns. Daniel Horowitz at starchmail.com. Please subscribe to Horowitz Show on YouTube for our video component and our Substack at Liberating Truths as well. Till tomorrow, Micah 6-8. God bless you all.